The warship Indomitable floated at the edge of human space, alone, rusted, and forgotten by almost everyone who mattered. Its once proud hull was scarred with age, and half its systems had not worked in years. The galactic Concord had long moved on to sleek, AI-driven warships, all smooth chrome and silent engines. But Indomitable had none of that. It creaked when it moved. It sparked when touched. Its main gun still needed manual targeting, and its engines coughed like a sick animal during FTL warm-up. Yet, deep inside its command deck, Captain Alara Miles sat in the worn-out captain's chair like it was a throne, tapping an old steel mug against her knee as the stale air recycled through the vents. She wasn't young, but she was sharp, and her mind worked faster than most fleet commanders who now gave orders from padded chairs far away from danger. Her crew, all volunteers and outcasts, moved like clockwork, checking systems no one had trusted in years. There was something stubborn in their eyes, something that said they were used to being overlooked and tired of it. Then the alert came. A distress call from the colony world Taraxis blinked onto their outdated comms array, almost as if it had traveled through time to reach them. Zalathi fleet approaching. We are unarmed, requesting immediate aid. The signal flickered with static, but the panic in the voice was clear. Ilara straightened, her face calm, though her heart had begun to race. She looked around at her crew, and no one had to ask what they would do. Orders came without hesitation. Plot a course, prep the engines, and ready what little weapons they had. The galaxy had already written them off. No command, no support, not even a message acknowledging their receipt of the call. It didn't matter. As the crew moved, Alara stood before the ship's dusty central console and whispered to its old AI core, a model so outdated most technicians thought it a joke. "Buster," she said. A few sparks flew, followed by a metallic groan. Then a voice answered, dry and low. "Still alive, huh? Figured you'd get yourselves killed before waking me up." Ilara smiled. "We've got one more run, Buster. One last jump." The ship shuddered as power rerouted to the FTL drive, systems straining like an old warhorse called back to battle. None of the newer ships would have made this jump without authorization, but Indomitable didn't care for red tape. As it leapt into the void, leaving a faint trail of heat behind, no one watching would have believed this relic was on its way to face an armada. No one gave it a second thought. In the polished halls of Fleet Command, the name Indomitable didn't even show on the active ship registry. But Ilara knew, her crew knew, and deep in the metal bones of the ship, Buster knew, too. There was something buried in this rusted frame that had been forged during humanity's hardest years. Something raw, brutal, and utterly unafraid. As stars streaked past the hull and Taraxis grew closer with every second, the ship groaned, like an old soldier waking up from a long sleep. And though no one said it out loud, a silent feeling passed through the crew. If this was to be their last mission, then let it be one the galaxy never forgot. Taraxis was a small colony world, green and blue like Earth once was, but its beauty offered little comfort as the sky darkened with the shadows of warships. The Zalathi fleet arrived at dawn, their silver-black ships sliding through orbit in perfect silence, as if daring someone to challenge them. But no one came. The colony's defense grid, untouched for years, blinked to life weakly before crashing, back into silence. Old cannons sat still, frozen by time and rust, and the planetary governor, a thin man named Arlen Voss, stood in the command center with shaking hands, staring up at the flickering monitor as the enemy fleet took position above. Civilians scrambled for underground shelters as sirens howled, though most knew it would not help if the Zalathi decided to fire. Fear hung over the colony like a fog. The governor sent out message after message, broadcasting distress calls to every known sector, but the answers were all the same. None. The Galactic Concord had written off Taraxis years ago as unimportant, and no one expected help. The governor sank into his chair, his voice barely above a whisper as he said, "We are alone." Then something strange happened. One of the technicians gasped. "There's a ship, just entered orbit." Everyone turned to the screen. What they saw brought more confusion than hope. It was old, It was dented. It looked more like a scrapyard relic than a warship. The words EDS Indomitable barely showed through the scorched metal on the hull. "That thing," someone said. "That's not a rescue." But it didn't run. It didn't retreat. It drifted in, slow and steady, as if it belonged there. The Zalathi fleet scanned it, and one of their cruisers sent out a public transmission, translated into Common. "Is this your champion? This rust bucket?" Laughter echoed through the comms, mocking and cruel. In the Indomitable's bridge, Captain Ilara Miles stood with her arms folded, watching the enemy ships circle like wolves. Her crew said nothing, just waited. Ilara stepped forward, pressed the comm button, and answered simply, "We are Taraxis's shield. If you want them, you go through us." On the planet below, Governor Voss listened in shock. He asked his staff, "Who is she?" But no one had a name. Only stories from decades past, rumors of a stubborn captain and her haunted ship. As the mocking voice of the Zalathi commander continued to taunt them, Ilara muted the channel and turned to her AI. "Buster, give me whatever targeting you can manage." The AI grumbled awake, lights flickering. 12 ships, 2 cruisers, 10 destroyers. "You brought me out of retirement for a death wish?" "I brought you out," she said, "because no one else came." The old warship systems began to groan to life. Plasma conduits hissed. Emergency lights flickered blue and red. Buster recalibrated the remaining weapons, speaking as he worked. "Main guns might fire once before melting. Shields are a joke. Engines will overheat in 2 minutes. But..." He paused and there was a grin in his voice. "We can make it hurt." Ilara's crew moved fast, running drills they had practiced in silence for months, always knowing the galaxy didn't expect them to do anything real. Now it was real. Very real. The Zalathi fleet didn't open fire immediately. They were too amused. They were used to enemies begging or surrendering. This one simply held position, motionless but ready. The civilians of Taraxis watched from hidden bunkers, breath held, children clinging to their parents, waiting to hear the first explosion. They didn't hear one for nearly an hour. Then Indomitable moved, not quickly, not powerfully, but deliberately. It slid between the planet and the enemy fleet, putting its rusted hull between the colony and the warships above. One of the Zalathi ships fired a warning shot, a beam of light that scorched the upper atmosphere. Ilara didn't flinch. She gave the order, "Fire plasma lances." 2 blasts shot from Indomitable's underside, glowing orange, wobbling slightly, from misaligned ports. But they hit. One of the destroyer's shields sparked and collapsed in a flash of light. The second blast tore through the hull. The Zalathi fleet stopped laughing. Their formation shifted. "Well," Buster muttered, "now we've got their attention." Ilara's jaw tightened. "Good, let them look at us." The enemy began to fire for real now. Bolts of energy lit up the sky, battering Indomitable's shields, which flickered and sparked. Inside, warning alarms screamed. Heat surged through the ship's bones. Ilara didn't sit. She stood tall, giving orders, rerouting power, calling damage reports. Her crew moved as one, some from Earth, others from colonies long forgotten. But all had chosen this ship, this fight. As explosions echoed, the people of Taraxis stared at the sky and saw something impossible, a single broken ship standing between them and destruction. They had been told they were too small to matter, that no help would come. Yet here it was. Not sleek, not powerful, but there. The Zalathi ships regrouped, now taking the human vessel seriously. They began a wide flanking maneuver, trying to encircle it. Ilara saw it and smiled coldly. "Let them come closer," she said. "Let them underestimate us one more time." In the silent control center on Taraxis, Governor Voss leaned toward the screen and whispered, "Come on. Prove them wrong." And in orbit above, the warship no one believed in prepared to do just that. The battle in orbit over Taraxis had truly begun, and the air inside the warship Indomitable was tense and hot. filled with the sound of groaning metal and warning alarms. That didn't stop. The Zalathi fleet was moving in, no longer laughing, no longer amused by the old Earthship floating in their path. They had seen it destroy one of their destroyers with weapons no ship of its class should still have, and now they meant to crush it quickly. But Indomitable was not ready to fall. Captain Alara Miles stood firm on the command deck, eyes locked on the flickering battle display. Her crew worked fast and silent, hands moving over ancient control panels with the focus of people who had trained not for glory, but survival. Sparks flew from overhead pipes as another blast shook the hull, but the crew didn't flinch. Down in the ship's core, the AI known as Buster was running hot, processing faster than it had in years, digging through old files and broken subsystems, searching for anything that might give them an edge. "There's something in here," Buster muttered, his voice crackling through the bridge speakers. "A weapons protocol from the first expansion war, restricted, ancient, never deployed in combat." Alara didn't even look away from the display. "Will it work?" Buster hesitated, then answered. "It was built before targeting AIs, before shield harmonics. It was meant to break things the hard way. I'll make it work." Alara gave the order. "Bring it online." In the belly of the ship, a long-forgotten weapons bay began to open. Dust and frost blew away as old magnetic coils hummed for the first time in a century. A hidden cannon, powered by unstable plasma cores and wrapped in living steel, rose from beneath the deck. It had no name, just a tag on its console. Experimental. Do not fire. Buster grinned in the dark. "Let's break the rules." On the battlefield, the Zalathi cruisers pushed forward. Their movements were clean and exact, guided by predictive AI that calculated every path of victory. But they had never fought something like this, something built in an age when war was dirty, brutal, and full of human chaos. Alara watched their lead cruiser adjust position and whispered, "Fire the legacy weapon." The weapon charged with a loud hum that shook the entire ship. Blue light gathered at the barrel's edge, and with a deafening roar, it launched a shot at impossible speed. The beam twisted in mid-space, ignoring standard targeting arcs. It slammed into the Zalathi cruiser not through its shield, but under it, punching through a weak spot their AI hadn't protected. The cruiser spun as its engines exploded, its belly torn open, venting fire and metal into orbit. Silence fell for a moment across the fleet. Then, like waking beasts, the rest of the Zalathi ships roared to life, opening full fire on Indomitable. The ship rocked violently, sparks flying in all directions, but the shield matrix held, barely. Crew members strapped in as Buster rerouted, power again shouting over the comms. "They've learned fast. We only get one surprise. Now we have to fight dirty." Alara nodded and gave new orders. Evasive moves, manual overrides, emergency countermeasures. They had no more tricks, but they had willpower. That was something no AI could measure. The crew moved together, anticipating each other without words. The helmsman rolled the ship behind one of the falling enemy cruisers to use it as cover. Gunners fired manually, adjusting for drift, trusting their instincts more than systems. Engineers tore panels off the walls to fix power lines with their bare hands. Even injured crew refused to leave their posts. The ship bled heat and metal, but it kept moving. On the surface of Taraxis, thousands watched from shelter monitors as the old Earthship danced between giants. Children stared with wide eyes. Adults held their breath. The people had expected death or silence, but now they dared to hope. Even the governor, once ready to surrender, leaned forward and said softly, "They're not just fighting. They're winning." Back in orbit, Alara felt the ship struggling. Hull temperature was rising. Life support was growing thin. But she didn't stop. She walked across the deck to an auxiliary station, took manual control of the railguns, and targeted another destroyer herself. She had been born during peacetime, trained in a dying branch of the fleet. But this moment, this battle, had burned the softness from her. She was steel now, just like her ship. Buster's voice came again. "Captain, one more push. One last move before we break." Alara whispered, "Then let's make it count." They charged straight at the last cruiser, dodging fire and debris, powering every system to the front guns. Shields collapsed. Metal peeled away. The cruiser's main cannon lit up, ready to fire. Then the final legacy shot launched, and the cruiser vanished in a flash of white light. Silence followed. The Zalathi ships that remained began to retreat. Not fast, not panicked, just careful, because now they feared the thing they had mocked. On board Indomitable, the bridge went quiet. Systems burned out, lights dimmed, but the ship was still there, floating above the colony like a guardian made of scars and smoke. And in that moment, everyone knew this was not just a ship, it was a legend. The stars above Tyraxis still burned with heat and smoke from the battle, and the wreckage of Zalathi's ships drifted through orbit like dark ghosts, silent reminders of what had just happened. Yet the war was far from over. The Zalathi had lost their vanguard and 2 cruisers, and that meant only one thing: reinforcements would come stronger and angrier. Inside the battered warship Indomitable, Captain Alara Miles stood over the cracked command console, her face covered in sweat and soot, her uniform torn at the shoulder, but her eyes steady. Around her the crew moved slowly now, exhausted. Their hands burned from rerouted wires, their voices hoarse from shouting over failing systems, yet none of them left their posts. Buster, the old AI, flickered to life again, his voice quieter than usual. "Long-range scans confirm it," he said. "Fleet signatures, 27 ships. This time it's the real force." Alara nodded, as if she had expected nothing less. The colony below was still untouched, protected for now by their shield, but that shield wouldn't last under a proper siege, and the planet's defense grid had no more strength to give. "We can't stop a full fleet," her helmsman whispered. "Not with what we've got left." Alara didn't answer right away. She looked up at the stars, then at her crew, then finally turned to the old plaque bolted above the main terminal. "Indomitable, built not to be broken." She tapped it once, a small sound in the silent bridge, then faced her people. "They brought numbers. We bring a legend." Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried weight. "We're not going to outgun them. We're going to outthink them. Every move we make has to count. This ship was born in a time when fleets were smaller, and captains had to be clever to survive. We're not here to hold the line. We're here to make them regret crossing it." The crew straightened. The energy in the room shifted, something deeper than fear or hope, something like faith. Buster hummed softly as he scanned the ship's systems again. "We've still got 1 active rail cannon. The legacy weapon's fried, but the core's cooling. I can route that energy to engines or stealth. Hull integrity is 80%. Shields are patchy, but we can fake a full field for short bursts." Alara rubbed her chin. "Good, let's vanish. Make them think we ran. Then we strike hard, and fast where it hurts." And so, Indomitable powered down all external signals and drifted into the shadows of Tyraxis's twin moons, cloaking itself behind debris, letting its heat signature drop until it looked like just another piece of wreckage. When the second Zalathi fleet arrived, they came with perfect formation: sleek cruisers, agile corvettes, heavy dreadnoughts lined with weapons. They spread out across orbit, scanning the planet below, and when they saw no enemy resistance, they assumed the first human ship had been destroyed or had fled. But Alara was waiting, and so was her ship. The first strike came without warning. A silent rail slug pierced the engines of a lead corvette, slicing it in 2 before it could react. The wreck spun into its neighbor, and both exploded. Before the rest of the fleet could respond, Indomitable fired its last 2 torpedoes, manually aimed, no AI tracking, just skill, and struck the central carrier square in its hangar bay, setting off a chain reaction that ignited internal fuel lines. Fire burst across the sky. The fleet panicked for a moment, breaking formation to search for the source. But by then, Indomitable had vanished again, sliding behind the gravitational curve of the moon, powered by nothing but momentum and old tricks. Buster growled through the speakers. "We're making them dance, Alara." And she smiled. "Good. Let's keep the music going." Over the next hours, Indomitable became a ghost, striking, disappearing, baiting ships into crashing paths, leading them into asteroid debris, tricking them into firing on each other through interference fields. It didn't matter that she was just one ship. She fought like a fleet, and every blow she struck reminded the Zalathi that this war wasn't about numbers, it was about will. Down on Taraxis, the people watched as flashes lit up the sky. They had expected death. Now they watched one battered Earthship outmaneuver a superior enemy, and it stirred something in them. Civilians volunteered to assist their old ground defenses. Engineers worked non-stop to repair sensors and uplinks. Children painted symbols of Indomitable on walls and shelters. The story was spreading, and with it, courage. Still, fuel ran low. The weapons cooled slower after every shot. The ship's bones creaked with every turn. Alara knew they were close to the edge. Then came the worst moment. One of the Zalathi dreadnoughts spotted their heat trail and fired a direct hit to Indomitable's aft engine. The ship spiraled, shaking violently. Lights went out. Sparks flew. Fires broke out on Deck 7. Alara was thrown from her station. Crew were injured. For a long moment, it looked like they were finished. But the old ship did not break. Buster rerouted power. The crew fought the fires. Alara climbed back to her feet with blood on her face and roared, "We are not done." The bridge lights flickered back on. The ship leveled out. And then they made their final move. They charged straight toward the heart of the enemy fleet, not to win, but to make them afraid. They rammed one destroyer out of their path. They ignited a fuel pod near a battle cruiser. And when they got within range of the command dreadnought, they opened a comm channel, one last message to the enemy. Alara stood in the flickering light of her failing bridge and said, calm and clear, "This is Captain Alara Miles of the Earth defense ship Indomitable. You brought a fleet. We brought a legend. Turn back, or we'll show you what legends are made of." For the first time, the Zalathi did not reply. They began to pull back, slow and careful. One by one, their ships slipped away into deep space, unsure of what they had just fought, and unwilling to risk more. On the surface of Taraxis, cheers broke out across the shelters. Lights returned. Screens lit up with the battered, smoke-scarred image of the ship that had saved them. It was limping. It was damaged. But it was still flying, and as it slowly descended into low orbit, hovering above the colony it had defended alone, everyone knew that from this day on, no one would ever laugh at the name Indomitable again. The stars over Taraxis were quiet now, but it was the kind of quiet that made people uneasy, the kind that came just before another storm, and everyone inside the warship Indomitable knew it. The Zalathi fleet had retreated, licking its wounds, but no one believed they were gone for good. Captain Alara Miles sat alone in the command chair, staring at the dim lights on the status board. Too many were red, too many systems on the edge of failure. The ship had held the line, again, but it had paid the price. One engine was down, the rail cannon was warped from overuse, the AI core was overheating, and the life support was barely functioning in half the decks. Yet the crew stayed, every one of them, not because they were ordered to, but because they believed in the legend their ship had become. Below in the engine room, engineers worked with burned hands, using spare parts scavenged from storage rooms, and even furniture to hold together power conduits. In the medbay, wounded crew helped patch others, refusing to rest when there was still work to do. Even Buster, the sarcastic old AI, had stopped making jokes. He was quiet now, focused, digging into ancient files stored deep in the ship's forgotten systems, looking for one more miracle. Meanwhile, in deep space, the storm was building. A new Zalathi force was on the move, and it was bigger than anything before. Scouts reported dozens of warships forming up, including a super dreadnought, a vessel so large it carried its own support fleet. Alara knew they would be the next target. Taraxis had no other defenses. Earth Command was too far away to send help in time. And yet, despite the odds, she wasn't planning to retreat. She stood up from her chair and walked the bridge, speaking to her crew. "They'll come with everything they've got," she said, "but they still don't understand what this ship is. Indomitable isn't just steel and wires. It's history. It's sacrifice. We are the tidewall between survival and extinction, and we will not break. The crew didn't cheer. They didn't need to. Their silence was stronger than shouting. They turned back to their stations and got to work. In the hours that followed, the crew and the ship became one. Gunners hand-loaded rounds into the last working turrets. Technicians reprogrammed defense drones as guided missiles. Buster rerouted power from the gravity plating to strengthen shields. Ilara herself helped repair the targeting sensors using a soldering kit and a pair of broken goggles. Everyone moved like this was their final stand, and perhaps it was. When the Zalathi Armada arrived, it blotted out the stars. The ships spread in a massive wave, surrounding Taraxis, a dark tide of destruction that moved as one. The lead ship, the dreadnought Kulzarn, sent a broadcast, an ultimatum. Surrender your vessel and the colony. Resistance will not be tolerated. You are outnumbered. You are outgunned. You are out of time. Ilara stood in front of the bridge camera and replied with a single word, no. Then the screen went black, and the final battle began. The first wave of enemy fire hit the shields like a hammer, shaking the ship down to its core. Hull plates buckled, systems sparked. But Indomitable fought back. She dove straight into the heart of the fleet, her single rail cannon firing molten slugs that punched holes in smaller ships. Her remaining torpedoes exploded inside tight enemy formations, breaking their coordination. Automated drones, now reprogrammed for kamikaze runs, slammed into Zalathi sensor arrays. Buster even triggered the old experimental pulse weapon, burning out half his own circuits to fry enemy scanners long enough for the ship to slip behind the dreadnought. Ilara gave orders like she was born for it. Quick, sharp, fearless. Pitch 30 degrees, fire starboard cannon, reroute cooling to the aft, she barked, and her crew followed without question. They trusted her, trusted the ship, trusted in something bigger than survival. But still, the damage mounted. Deck 4 collapsed under a direct hit. The last torpedo room caught fire. 2 crew were lost, sealing an airlock breach. The bridge lights flickered as emergency power failed again and again. In the medbay, the doctor administered painkillers by hand, the automatic injectors long dead. Taraxis watched it all unfold, helpless. Civilians gathered in bunkers, their eyes fixed on the skies, seeing only brief flashes of light through thick clouds, each one a moment of hope or loss. And then something changed. The Zalathi ships slowed. Their formations thinned. They began to retreat, not because they were losing by numbers, but because they were shaken. This one human ship, this relic, this broken vessel with smoke in its wake and fire in its gut, was refusing to fall. The dreadnought Kulzarn turned to face Indomitable directly, ready to end it. It charged its main weapon, a Starcore cannon, capable of melting a moon. Ilara saw it and knew they couldn't escape, couldn't block it, couldn't survive it. Unless... She turned to Buster. What's left in the core? Buster's voice was faint. Enough for one last jump. Manual detonation required. Ilara nodded. Then prep the core. She sent the evacuation order. All hands to escape pods. Get to the colony. The crew hesitated. Captain, that's an order, she shouted. One by one they left, tears in their eyes, hands on their hearts. The escape pods launched, raining like silver seeds toward the surface. Alone now, Ilara walked the length of the bridge, touching the railing, the walls, the cracked console, saying goodbye. You did everything I asked, she whispered. Let's finish this. She guided the ship directly toward Kulzarn. The enemy dreadnought opened fire, tearing holes through Indomitable's hull. Fire raged. The ship groaned, but it didn't stop. It charged forward like a wounded animal, one last act of defiance. When it was close enough, Ilara stood at the core control and triggered the overload. A light filled the ship, a bright, blinding white, and in a single moment, Indomitable became a sun. The explosion tore through Kulzarn, ripping it in half, breaking its fleet into scattered wrecks. Silence fell. In the dark sky above Taraxis, only drifting pieces remained. The colony was safe. The people were saved. And the legend was sealed. Indomitable was gone, but her story would never die. Smoke still curled in the upper sky of Taraxis, drifting like ghost trails from the shattered remains of the Zalathi dreadnought. And though the war was finally over, the silence that followed did not feel like peace. It felt like something had been lost, something too big to understand yet. In the cratered plains outside the colony's capital dome, survivors had begun gathering near a wide clearing where escape pods had landed days earlier, and among them were the last crew members of Indomitable, faces pale with grief, uniforms torn and scorched, but heads held high. No one said much at first, not even when the planetary governor came to greet them, or when the children of the colony walked up holding flowers and hand-drawn images of a ship with fire in its wake and a name painted across its hull. They all looked to the sky, to the empty space where a ship once stood between them and annihilation. Captain Alara Miles was gone. So was the ship she had sworn to keep flying. But the story was already taking shape, passed in whispers from mechanic to farmer, from soldier to child, until it turned into something more, a legend. Engineers from the colony returned to the battlefield in orbit, gathering debris, scanning for any trace of the ship's data core, while salvagers reported fragments of hull plating still glowing from the last explosion. Someone found the edge of the ship's main nameplate, just 4 letters left, DOMI. It was enough. The people began rebuilding the dome's central tower, and at the highest point they mounted the plate, sealed in transparent alloy, so it could be seen from every corner of the valley. Below it they carved a line in stone, one ship against the tide. Ilara's name was added to the records of Earth's greatest captains, and the surviving crew were given medals, but none of them stayed on Earth. They returned to Taraxis, choosing to build something new from the place they had defended. Commander Hale opened a flight school for young colonists, teaching them the tactics Ilara used to defeat a fleet with a dying ship. Chief Engineer Voss turned the ship's remaining schematics into public archives so that even a child could study the systems that had made Indomitable live longer than anyone thought possible. And Buster, damaged but not erased, was recovered from a broken core fragment and placed into the colony's central network, where he joked a little less and taught a little more, guarding the colony like he had once guarded his ship. Yet even as life returned and children laughed in the streets again, the stars still watched, silent and far. Scouts reported that the Zalathi homeworld had fallen quiet, their fleet fractured and leaderless. Rumors said some of them had even begun to question the war, shaken by what one ship had done. But no one on Taraxis trusted silence anymore. The Colony Council voted to build new defenses, not just walls or guns, but ships. Ships inspired by the one that had saved them. They named the project the Indomitable class, and the first hull they laid down bore the number NCX-1, with its sister ships to follow. But no ship would ever carry the original name again, not because they feared to use it, but because it belonged to something too sacred to copy. People would pause when they spoke the name, letting it settle like the first snow or a soldier's salute. And still, deep in the colony's records, a hidden folder existed, locked behind old codes and layered encryption. Inside it were Ilara's final logs, the AI fragments Buster had managed to save before the core went critical. The colony didn't release them right away, but they would someday, when they believed the next generation was ready to hear the voice of a captain who gave everything to defend people who couldn't fight for themselves. For now, they told the story in simple ways. Through music, through painting, through quiet walks under the stars where someone would point upward and say, "She flew right through that patch of sky." And others would nod, eyes wide, hearts full. In the end, it wasn't the fire or the weapons or the tactics that made Indomitable unforgettable. It was what it meant. That courage didn't require size, that hope didn't need permission, and that sometimes, when all the odds are against you, you still fight. Not because you believe you'll win, but because the people behind you are worth protecting. The name Indomitable was carved into more than stone. It lived in stories, in lessons, in dreams. It echoed through the corridors of the ships that followed, whispered by new captains as they touched their own hulls for the first time. It was the name they wouldn't forget, the name that stood between a world and its end, the name of a ship that flew one last time into darkness and lit a fire bright enough to be seen across the stars.